Thank you, Pastor.
And the first question I'm going to ask has to do with your research and what it has been used for. Like, I found out this afternoon that your research has been used in some pretty spectacular things that I didn't know about, and I'm pretty sure none of us knew about. And I think, which, not The Chase? Was it The Chase or the other book? The Search. Okay. So, how did you go about this? Why did it come about, and how has it been used?
Well, actually, it came about, the initial spark that kicked it off is when I was in college. And I was a junior at the university. And as I told a pastor today at lunch, God and I were not on speaking terms, if you understand what I mean. I was raised in a pastor's home, so I knew about God. But just in college, I just didn't want to have anything to do with him. But my Western civilization class, the professor stood up on the first day. He held a Bible or a textbook in one hand and a Bible in another hand. He says, if you want to know facts, then you need to stay in this class because we're talking about truth. But if you want to know fables, myths, then you can rely upon this book. As a matter of fact, if you're interested in this, then go down the hall to Dr. Green's philosophy class. I don't need you in my class. But if you want facts, then stay in my class because these two do not complement one another, nor will they ever agree. I raised my hand and I said, Doctor, I disagree with you. Said, my father would never lie to me. And my father told me that the Bible is history and that I can rely upon it. And he says, young man, you're wrong. And your father is wrong. And I said, no, sir. As a matter of fact, I'm going to prove you wrong. And that's when I began traveling and researching the life of Jesus. And I spent the next 42 years collecting information, traveling to more than 50 countries, gathering all of this information. And it all came together in the book that's out there on the table called The Search. It didn't necessarily turn out the way I wanted it to initially, but the publisher felt that they wanted to have a textbook, basically. So I wrote The Search on a textbook type format. The Chase, that's kind of a revision of the Search and made it more readable for an average person rather than a college a graduate college student. But the Search has been very well received, and we're over 500,000 copies now, and one of the and in a few countries it's number one bestseller, and that doesn't include the ones that's been stolen from us. We've had the book translated into other languages, and they have, without our knowledge nor our approval, and then they have in turn are selling it, and which that's what it's God's, it's not mine, and the only thing I have labeled on it is just my name, and but it's God's, and so if He wants to do that, then that's fine. We've been very privileged to to have the text used for some, I guess you can call it notoriety situations. A man by the name of David Balsinger was the technical director of Mel Gibson's movie, The Passion of Christ. And I had been on the Shroud of Turin committee, and David was there filming that live, so he remembered me from that situation, and he asked me if I would be willing to be a technical advisor for the Passion of Christ. And so the book, The Search, was used as the historical background information for the scourging scene of Jesus's scourging in the Passion of Christ. And presently, I'm the content advisor and content rep for the television productions of The Chosen. And so that's basically it. My biggest thrill is to be husband of my wife. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the book, The Search, has been adopted by some universities as textbook materials, and I'm proud to announce that it has been accepted as a curriculum material for the University of Cairo, the very first Muslim university to adopt a strictly Christian perspective of the life of Jesus as a historical book for their Roman history course at the University of Cairo. So.
Questions?
I just wanted to ask, when did you, during your search, you were trying to prove your professor?
Yes, ma'am.
When did you when did you and God start back speaking?
It didn't take long because it was in the midst of all of this. I was running pretty heavy for God or against God, and but you know, when you run against God, you're going to run up against a brick wall, and that's what happened. It just a matter of probably less than a year later. The Lord basically slapped me and said, "Pay attention to your own research. You know, just pay attention." And as a result, I did, and here I am today.
And I just want to say I moved because my wife told me my head was in your shot line. So
What'd you say?
she said my head was too big for the shot. So
What'd you say?
The Bible on your chest.
Yeah, I was. In fact, I was very perplexed. I was just torn, and I actually tried to commit suicide by driving 100 miles an hour into a bridge, and but it didn't work. And while I was out laying on my back, my aunt visited me, and a strong believer, and she placed a Bible on top of my chest, and I hadn't, you know, and I was out, and for some reason I woke up, and I looked at that thing on my chest, and it was a Bible. It was turned to the book of John, last chapter of John, where Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, lovest thou me more than these?" And, well, that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I started thinking, Ron, do you love all of this garbage that you're involved with more than me? I saved you. I've called you. Now, what are you going to do about it? And as a result of that, I woke up and recommitted myself to the Lord. I committed myself to the Lord when I was about 9 years old, but I recommitted at that time and have been serving Him ever since that time. So,
This is definitely on now. So I'm just thinking, as a father, for you to be like totally walking away from God, for you to stand up for your dad in that moment of your class, what was it about? Because that could have gone either way.
yeah.
What was it about your memory of your dad and everything that?
Well, primarily, to be quite honest with you, it was I felt like my professor was calling my dad a liar. I said, nope, I'm from Texas. That don't work. and it didn't, and that was the motivation. Yes,
And your dad was friends with Dr. Hagen, correct?
that's correct, yeah. Now, my dad was a pastor for 72 years, and he died just a few years ago, at age 96. And he was, of course, he's a World War II veteran. He was a 101st Airborne Division that jumped in Normandy behind the lines. And so he, when he came to the Lord, it was a major thing. And after he committed himself to the Lord, he began preaching and never quit. And so over the years, my admiration went from fear to admiration. So.
Please share a little more about what the cause of your heart changed so that you ended up driving yourself at 100 miles an hour. What was going on in life that caused you to go that route?
The plans that I had laid out for my life seemed to be crumbling all around. And there just didn't seem to be any way out of the present situation and putting my life back on the road to this great plan that I had for me and for my future. And it seemed like that it was just crumbling. And so, and I knew without a doubt that God couldn't help me, because if God could have helped me, he would have done it already. Of course, it didn't cross my mind that I have to call out to him. Okay. But things were just not going the way that they should have been going as I anticipated, and they just fell apart. So that was the primary reason.
I don't know if you remember or not, but I asked you a question some time ago about this carbon dating method
Yes.
that is being used. And it just occurred to me, because there's so much that's been taught over the generations about evolution and the finding of items or, bones and things of that nature and what they mean. Can you give us, this is pretty extensive, but can you give us maybe a rough percentage of some of the key points of the difference between the secular understanding of archaeology and historical facts and the spiritual. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, difference, because you know you hear the story and well, there's enough truth to make a lie seem plausible. So the question is, give us an idea of what truths the secular people are missing.
Well, when you look at the secular and the typical general science and their discoveries and their conclusions and hypotheses, and compare that to the creationist point of view, there's a major conflict, primarily because there's a misrepresentation of when day one was. Okay, the evolutionists say day one was millions of years ago, and they point to fossils and geological the geological levels and so forth to say, okay, well you could tell that this geological strata was 5 million years ago and that type of thing, whereas the creationist they say, well, we can't get past 10,000 years, preferably about 4,000 BC is when it all began, and so everything has to fit like a nice package into that framework. But unfortunately for the creationists, that doesn't fly with science. Primarily because the creationists feel and speculate that day one was the day one of creation. Well, it is a fact that the sun is the sun and the moon is the moon, and rotations and revolutions and that type of thing haven't changed. And the sun does regulate the days and so forth. But when God created the earth and all therein, there it was in the universe, so when God created that, it was absolutely perfect. And it was intended, as well as animals, man, and all that, it was intended that they were to last forever. No sin, no decay, no death, no disintegration. It was intended to last in perfection forever. Consequently, in reality, there was no time. There was no decay. There was no countdown to the end. Now, time as we know it, that's regulated by this watch on my arm and by your clocks at home or whatever. That is basically a countdown to the end, right? Okay. When did it start? It did not start in perfection. It started the day that Adam sinned. Now, before the day that Adam sinned, the universe could have been in existence for a day or a billion years. Mm-hmm. And it existed in perfection. Mm-hmm. So time as we know it, regulated by this watch and your watches, time as we know it began the day Adam sinned, which was less than 10,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. So when we start the whole discussion based on accurate time of beginning of time, then there is no conflict.
There was this organization, or should I say this municipality, some of you may have heard of it, called Rome, and I believe they took an interest in Jesus. and may have assigned people to watch him.
Oh, very much so.
Did you go about discovering documentation about that was created by Rome, marking this character Jesus, and what fascinating things did you find there? I mean, you don't have to do all because there's several books out there filled with it all. But you know, what was something like you looked and said, "Wow, I didn't."
Just about everything about Jesus. I mean, it's a studying the life of Jesus. Not only does he become your savior, but he becomes your hero. Because, oh my goodness, there's so much about him that just blows your mind. And the Romans, they recognized it. See, under Augustus Caesar, he was quite upset that his court scribes were padding the history, making him look good, making Rome look good, making the military look good, even though it was basically deception. Like, rather than recording defeats of the army, they were always victorious, regardless. Everything Augustus Caesar did was inspired by the gods rather than recording anything of his failures. So he became very perturbed with that. And he made a proclamation, and he says, every word that you write has to be absolute truth. And not only that, every court had its own scribes in the court. Every senator, there was a historical scribe that accompanied them throughout their daily life, every place they went. Every officer in the army, the same thing. Every magistrate, every mayor. And during the time of Augusta, and it was transferred even into the reign of Tiberius, who is next, he says this: if it is discovered that anything is written and recorded that is not true, then both your hands will be removed, both your eyes will be removed, and I will personally gouge out your eyes. Well, 18 of them didn't believe him. And 18 became victim of Augustus' wrath. Tiberius, by the time he took over, they didn't have to play with it anymore. Absolute perfection. And during the time of Tiberius and Augusta were the two times in history that it is determined that the historians were 100% correct in their records. Now, Tiberius took a very special interest in anyone who was influential in the East, primarily because in the year 17 AD, Tiberius was in Greece, and he was there on holiday. While he was there, he had a dream. And in this dream, he was sitting on his judgment seat. And into the hall, the judgment hall, walked a man who was dressed in royal apparel. Contrary to Tiberius's personality, he got up out of his chair and bowed down before him. And the deity says, "No, do not bow before me. I'm only a representative of the Most High I am." Then Tiberius says, "Then what do you want of me?" And he says, during the time of Augusta, in the eastern provinces of the kingdom, meaning Rome, there was a virgin who conceived and birthed a Theophilus. Theophilus was a Chaldean Cross Latin word which meant King of Kings, Lord and Lords forever and ever. And he says, of his kingdom there will be no end. His influence will last forever, through all of eternity. And then the man left. And Tiberius said at that time, he says, I will spend the remainder of my days locating the Theophilus. There was a special committee that was appointed by him to research and to evaluate every prominent individual in the kingdom, in the empire, to find out who this Theophilus was, especially in the East. Consequently, there was a group of men who were hired by Tiberius. We called them the Herodians. And they were basically worshipers of King Herod and servants of King Herod. And the Romans hired them, appointed them to investigate any person of prominence. So consequently, Jesus had Roman scribes following him around, everything he did, everything that was accomplished, and recording everything. We have 129 events in our Gospels that about the life of Jesus that we know. Of course, we know that according to John, that could have been thousands and thousands, but we have 129. Of those 129 events, 111 of those are also recorded by Roman historians following Jesus around. And I found most of those at the Vatican Library in Rome. And I was very, very, very fortunate. The Vatican Library has a restricted visitors list of 110 people. And you can get on the list, but if someone else dies, then you can be on there. But they have special recognition to heads of state that they're allowed to go in and do research and so forth, and anyone that is their assistant can go with them. Well, a very good friend of mine was the Prime Minister of Albania, Alexander Maxi. And he was going to the Vatican to begin diplomatic relations with the Vatican on behalf of Albania. And he asked me to go with him. And so I was honored, and we went to Rome and met with the Vatican officials to develop diplomatic relations with the Vatican. And they invited him to go to the Special Secret Archives Library. And he willingly accepted. He was an archaeologist himself before he was prime minister. And so he received lifetime permission to go in and out of the library as he wanted to. And then he asked, he says, would you object if my assistant was able to come also? Pointing to me. So my name was registered on the visitors list, jumping on the back of the prime minister. And that library is absolutely phenomenal. They have some of their documents they have in there, scrolls or documents. It's the only copy, the only one in the whole world. And they have everything down there has been translated into Latin, into English, into Spanish, German, and what else? Spanish, German, Italian. And so you're not allowed to handle the documents themselves, but you're certainly able to do the research with the translations that you have. And so that's where I found the majority of the information about the life of Jesus that was recorded by the Romans.
I was told to ask about Noah's Ark, that you had story to tell. And I did get the book. I saw it was printed in 2012. If there's anything since 2012 that you can add to the story. I haven't read it yet, of course.
No, we have not been allowed to go back since 2012. But I don't know if y'all may remember, some of you that are my age, perhaps, 1989, there was a massive earthquake on the border of Turkey and Armenia. And over 8,000 people were killed. And Mount Ararat is the largest mountain in that area. They call it Agradai. And it's on the border of Armenia and Turkey, on the northern border. And the earthquake actually centered on Ararat because that Agradai is a volcano, and its activity is what caused the earthquake. And so it was quite devastating to the region. And but Mount Ararat is a mountain that was over 17,000 feet tall, has a permanent ice cap on that. And this permanent ice cap, it looked like from high altitude photographs that it could have broken and cracked. The ice broke open, and which was not a big deal. But what was a big deal is on the north side of the mountain, actually in the border kind of cuts the mountain in two, and on the north side of the mountain, on the Armenia side, there was a Russian military base. It was nuclear military base. On the south side of the mountain in Turkey, there was a NATO military base, which was also nuclear. Of course, both of them denied it. But there was a major concern that if this ice became destabilized and it actually did break open, then that ice could come crashing down the mountain and cause a major nuclear disaster. And so there were thousands of pictures taken of the mountain, and they never did come to a decision whether there was the ice was stable or not. So they pulled together a team at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, to study the photographs and to talk about the things. And they decided that we couldn't determine whether it's stable or not, so we need to put together an expedition. Well, in some of the photographs, there was a crevasse that had broken open because of the ice, and it was about 1,000 feet wide and about a half a mile long, and at least 1,000 feet deep. And within that crevasse, there was an image of a box-shaped object. Well, the Russians immediately accused America of planning a nuclear device up there. Of course, the Americans then counter-blamed the Russians for putting a nuclear device up there. So the expedition was put together for number one priority is to determine whether the ice was stable. Number two objective was to go to this thing and find out what it is. Is it a nuclear device or not? What is it? And it was a joint nation venture between the United States, Turkey, and Russia, Warsaw, and NATO. And I was very, very fortunate to be one of the 13 selected to go on the expedition. And my job was, if we found anything, try to find out what it is. And so, to make a very, very long story short, we made, Russia supplied the big helicopter that we used. They also supplied all the high-tech equipment, microwave, subsurface radar, and all of that type of thing. Turkey supplied the military escort. We had 42 soldiers with us, plus the military on the ground. They also supplied all of the permits that we would need, not only in Turkey, but also the Armenia permits and the United Nations permits and so forth. And Russia and America supplied the research team and the money. And so the expedition went off very well and made numerous trips around the mountain, taking hundreds and thousands of feet of videotape and photographs and so forth. And ultimately, we determined that the ice was stable. And there was rumblings because of the volcano, but generally the ice seemed to be stable. An interesting point is that the helicopter pilot was President Gorbachev's personal helicopter pilot from Russia, and openly professed atheist. Of course, at that time, many in Russia were. But after we determined that the ice was stable, then we went to the second objective, which is to look at this object and find out what it is. Well, we made a number of trips around there, and then finally we just hovered on this object, looking at it, and it was made out of wood. I don't know of any nuclear devices made out of wood, and so we sent back the report that this was a wooden something. And then we started. I was one of the Christians on the group, and me and another guy initially, and 8 out of 13 by the time we got back became believers. But this Russian pilot, we were hovering, and we'd been talking about possibility of Noah's Ark because of this wooden thing on Ararat, on Agardai. And all of a sudden, he started crying. And I says, Yuri, is there a problem? He says, yeah, that's my problem right there. He says, all of my life, I was told this was fairy tales. This was myth. This was Mickey Mouse. But now I can see with my eyes that this is true. He said, maybe there's more things in your Bible that's true also. And I said, absolutely. And there, hovering, looking at this object, Yuri accepted Jesus as his Savior. Eventually went back to Moscow, started a church there. And the last we heard was a number of years ago, but it was still functioning. President Gorbachev's mother was a member of it. And so it was powerful enough for this atheist in his heart to melt. But we landed, we jumped out actually on top of the mountain, rappelled down about 2,000 feet, but the object was sitting at about a 45-degree angle, and so we really couldn't get any footage on that. So we went ahead and went back down and landed at the bottom, or actually at the 10,000 meter plateau, or 10,000 feet plateau, and then climbed back up. And the research guys, we made measurements and so forth. And it ended up being broken in two pieces. But the subsurface radar indicated the length. It was about 600 feet long and probably about 90 to 95 feet wide, about 50, 60 feet tall. Had a very small gabled roof, and obviously a boat made out of wood. We took core samples. The walls were 4 feet thick. The floor was 6 feet thick. And then on the inside and the outside was about maybe 2 inches of a varnishy, oily type substance that could be used as certainly as waterproofing. We took the samples back to Stanford University, Palo Alto Laboratories, and tested it, carbon dating, tested it 15 times. 12 times indicated that the wood was about 5,000 BC, which was 7,000 to 10,000 years old. And it was also, the wood was, the object was made with an ancient construction process that they call gophering. Gophering was put laminates of wood together under pressure, and just like plywood. And so gopher is not a type of wood, it's a process. Just like plywood, it's a gopher process. And 15 different types of wood were used. They were able to identify 12 of those. And so I forgot who asked the question. Anyway, that's the okay. That's the Ark story. And I can't say that it was Noah's Ark. There wasn't a sign up there that said that. And we were restricted from Turkey. You had to sign a document from Turkey, and they said that if there was a public release, that they were going to be the ones to do it, and that we were forbidden to speak publicly and claim that this was the Ark of Noah, for a very good reason. The Holy Quran. The Quran has a good representation of the story of Noah, and they cover it very well. But they say that the Ark of Noah came to rest on El Judi. El Judi is a mountain that we climbed. It's about 200 miles south of Arad, and we went down there and looked around, didn't see nothing. But the Quran says that the Ark of Noah landed on El Judi. So if Turkey, a Muslim country, was to make the announcement that the Ark of Noah has been found on the mountain that the Bible claims is the resting place, then that would cast doubts upon the validity of the Quran. And Turkey is not in a position right now to be the center of World War III, which would happen.
Is there anything in Egypt that while you were there, that you worked on or discovered in archaeological findings?
That's a softball.
I mean, you're over there. Did you do any researches on?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Things like that?
Yes, sir. We found a few things, and some of them ended up in the museum over there, the Archaeological Museum of Egyptian History, and but it was my area of expertise over there is Roman history, and you have to have a representative of the Egyptian government with you when you do excavating and things like that, because they'll stop you. They say, well, your permit says Roman, and here you're looking at you're digging up Byzantine, you're digging up Greek, you're digging up ancient Egyptian, and you're not allowed to. And so as far as what we were given the privilege of doing it and the permit to do, then yes, we found, Roman coins and the Roman burials and that type of thing. But certainly not anything spectacular like a Ramses or a Tutankhamun or something like that. But it was fascinating. In Egypt, you put a spade down any place, you'll find something. So probably the richest place in the world for archaeological artifacts.
Tell the whole story.
Which one is that?
The one about going in the pyramid,
Oh,
finding the underground chamber.
yeah, this is where my wife saved my life. I had read, when I was in college, a book called Magic by Aleister Crowley. And Aleister Crowley was considered one of the most evil men who ever lived. He was a witch and a Satanist, a devout Satanist. And he had made the statement, which also was confirmed by some of the, or he confirmed some of the speculations by people like Saint Jerome and some of those early church leaders. And they said, in the Great Pyramid, which is a phenomenal. If you ever get over to Egypt, make sure you go to the Great Pyramid, and it's a phenomenal edifice. But there's a subterranean chamber at the bottom, and you get to that subterranean chamber by going down a shaft that's about 130 feet, and you kind of slide on your back to get down there. And then once you get down to this room, the room itself is the bottom chamber is about 25 foot square. And in the center, there's a well. They call it the Well of Souls. And it has a wellhead maybe about 1 meter tall, and then the hole just goes straight down. And you can stand there and drop a stone, and you never hear it hit bottom. The Egyptian government themselves put 300 meters of cable down there and never hit bottom. And it was, and so there was a lot of mystique associated with that. And at the time that I went down there, I've been down there a number of times, but on this particular occasion, I decided to go at night because these mystics, who, in my opinion, were just fakes. But anyway, these mystics says that the spirits come out at night and so forth. So the pyramid was dark. They have lights in there for the tourists, but once the sun goes down, the lights go off, and man, you talking about black. I mean, you can't even see the hand in front of your face, and it's so, the blackness and the darkness is so heavy that you can feel it. It's that heavy. But anyway, I got down to that subterranean chamber, and the only light that's supposed to have been on in that pyramid was my headlight that I had on. And so I got down there to the chamber, and as I was going down the shaft to it, I noticed that there was this glow that was coming from the opening. So once I got down into the chamber, it was like a baby blue glow all over. And over to the north, there's a little platform type thing. It was about 3 foot off the floor. And the ceiling was probably about 12 feet. And so there was maybe 8 or 9 feet, about 10 feet from the top of this platform to the ceiling. And so I got down there, and got in the room, and I looked over to this platform, and there were two women there that they were absolutely the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my entire life, except for my wife. But these women were absolutely gorgeous, dressed in this transparent blue silky type things. But they had the voice of a man. And I walked in there, and they pointed at me. He says, "You have no right to be here." And I says, "What?" He says, "We know you. You have no right to be here." I said, "I have as much right to be here as you do." I said, "This is God's land." "It is not." And then I got slammed up against the wall, and it knocked me out. And the next thing I knew, it was about 5 or 6 hours later, and I was outside of the pyramid laying on the ground. And I found out later that the Lord had woke Paula up. He says, "You pray for your husband right now. Right now." And she continued to intercede and to pray for the next 6 or 8 hours until she was able to get a hold of me. And how I got there, I don't know. What happened to get me up the chamber, I don't know. I didn't climb. But I do know that I'm very grateful for my wife for saving my life. But she says I'm crazy. I said I'm hard-headed. I said, I'm not going to let these spooks drive me off. So I went back.
No, I'm with you. I'm going back.
So I went back a couple of nights later, and they weren't there. But I said, well, since I'm here, I'm gonna check out this well. And so I was kind of figuring out how to get what I was going to do, because I looked down in there, and there was a little ledge about that big that went all the way around the inside. But it was about maybe 7 or 8 feet down. So I couldn't. I tried to get down there and get on it, but I couldn't. So I held on to the wellhead, and I said, okay, I only have about 6 or 8 inches so to drop. So I let go, and I dropped, and I hit the ledge with my head. My feet were spread out, and I hit it, but I lost my balance, and I went forward like that. And when I hit the wall of the well, the wall caved in, and it was a plaster wall. And so I went into this little tunnel type thing, and so I said, okay, let's see what this is. And so I went on back, and we ended up finding another chamber that was in there, and it was y'all may have saw it the last year or so that they had to talk about the secret chambers in the Great Pyramid, and so it. But she forbade me from going back in there again. So.
No.
She must have run them things off.
Yeah, we want to hear your voice too.
I don't know what to say.
What you say? What you was?
About the story?
The story.
Oh, well, it wasn't all night. See, because it was night in Egypt. So it was daytime in America. And I got to work that morning, and I was still worrying about him, praying about him.
She was working for Larry McKenna, Christian Financial Process.
And so I just kept praying and praying. I kept calling the hotel. Nobody knew where he was. And I just kept praying. I asked everybody to pray. And finally, you see, you didn't wake up that whole day. He didn't wake up. So I don't know when I got you. Whenever he woke up. But he was really, really bad, in bad shape. So, and he went back down there.
By himself?
By himself. By himself. He's crazy.
Nobody with you?
But I did take pictures of the new chamber and gave them to the Ministry of Antiquities. So. Well, I would have gotten in trouble had it not been for a good friend of mine who was a senior parliamentarian in the Egyptian parliament, and that was kind of an interesting thing too. You remember when the Olympics was in Atlanta? Well, I had to go back to Atlanta to visit my heart doctor, and this was during the Olympics time, and so my appointment was on a Friday, and I was stupidly there on Thursday, and so I missed the day of my appointment, and there I was driving down I-75 in the middle of Olympic traffic, and I was kicking myself. I said, "You idiot! What are you doing down here?" And so I was just flying down the expressway and went right by this car, and there was a girl out there who was trying to change a flat, and as I went by her, the Lord said, "Stop, go back and help." I said, "Oh God, I don't have enough time for this. I got to get out of this city." And the Lord said, "You go back." So I went back. Come to find out, she was a member of the Egyptian women's field hockey team. And so I helped her with her flat, and we got a new tire for her. And she said, "I want to introduce you to my father." I said, "Okay." And so we went over to the Ritz-Carlton where they were staying, and he just happened to own it. And not only did he own that Ritz-Carlton, he owned 9 others in America. He also was the senior parliamentarian for the Parliament of Egypt. He was the Minister of Industry for the Egyptian government. He was the director of OPEC, and he was the owner of Aramco, the largest Arabic oil company in the world. And he told me, he says, "You stopped and you helped my daughter when you didn't have to. And because you helped my daughter, then anything that you want in Egypt, you have." And so it is through him that I didn't get in trouble. Because when I told him what had happened, he says, "Forget it. We'll take care of that." And he is, through his influence, we've tapped into that source quite often, and he's more than willing to accept and to help us out.
May I go back to
Yes,
your
ma'am.
story of the spirit one, the blue lights that you were talking
Yes,
about?
ma'am.
What was or what is your impression of all that they told you? You don't belong here.
Well, I thought it was kind of arrogant on their part. But, because during the years that we have been there, we have seen dozens and dozens of times these 20th and 21st century druids that think that they're trying to conjure up some spirits, and the Satanists get out there and the New Agers with their O's and the ahs, and it's very comical, really. And so it really didn't affect me like it probably should have, because I just considered them to be some more of these idiots that do the and waiting for the pyramid power to come down and zap them and all of this type of stuff. And so I should have paid more attention and certainly realized that this was a dangerous situation. This wasn't play. So,
Dr. Oh, I see
yes,
somebody's
yes,
hand.
ma'am.
So I love to read the account of scientists who are confirming what we believe by faith. And it's always fascinating to me how science confirms their faith or brings them into a place of faith. And so I just wonder for you, and I've heard a lot of things that this could fall into that category, but I wonder for you and for your beautiful wife, what have you encountered? What can you share with us that you've encountered that has confirmed what you believe by faith, but you've been able to ascertain through scientific evidence?
Well, I can cover that as in a general answer, and then we can also get more detailed if you choose. But generally, we've dug up a lot of stuff and found a lot of things. And I can say this, that out of all of the things that we have been involved with and all of the archaeological things, we have not found one single thing that contradicts the Word of God. Not a single thing. But dozens and hundreds of stuff that confirm. One comes to mind. This was in Albania. There's a Roman amphitheater there in Durrës, Albania. And this amphitheater was built in the 1st century by Christian slave labor. And 5,000 Christians faced death there through the blood games, the gladiator games and animals and that type of thing. And those Christians are buried there in the catacombs as well as in the arenas. And the 1st and 2nd century Christians were all buried the same way. Whether they lost their lives in Syria, Samaria, Greece, France, Africa, wherever. If they were Christians, they were buried one way in that 1st and 2nd century. They were laid on their right side with their legs pulled up in a fetal position. They were laying on their right hand with their left hand extended. And in the left hand, they always were buried with something that was very near and dear to them. It could be a necklace, an earring. It could be a lock of their children's hair or anything like that they were buried with. Well, we were excavating, me and two guys from the University of Tirana, and these guys were atheists. Of course, at that time, everyone in Albania was atheist. But they were helping me. And this was a Christian grave. Our paleontologist says that the skeletal remains were of a girl, and the girl was probably about maybe 14, 15 years old. In fact, her entire left side were all her ribs and the bones were all broken and gnarled. You could still see teeth marks of the animals still on the bones from this little girl. And these guys were getting the dust off of the extended hand. And I was down at the feet. I was brushing the dust off of the feet and get ready to study this grave, or the bones. And all of a sudden, these guys went crazy. They started climbing out of the tomb, and just they were as white as a sheet. And I said, "What's the matter with you guys? Get back down here. We're not finished yet. Get down here." No. We will not. I said, "Why? What's the problem?" And they started pointing down to where they were with this extended hand. So, when they were climbing out, they scattered dirt all over and covered the hand back up. So I went over there and started brushing the dust away and the sand away. And I noticed that in the hand, this extended hand, there was a very small clay tablet that she had been buried with. And on that tablet, written in Greek, was these words: "For the cause of Christ, I lay down my life." And one of those guys that were there, one of those atheists, he dropped to his knees and accepted Jesus right there on the spot. And he ultimately went to Lasia, Albania, and started a church. And it was, the last we heard, doing very well. Yeah, we did. We got him into Bible college in America first, and then he went back to start the church. And I'm sure that little 13, 14-year-old girl never even entered her mind that 2,000 years after her death, her testimony would be strong enough to melt the heart of an atheist. And so that's just one example of that.
All right, family, we got time. We'll do one more question. Anybody have one more question that you want to give to Dr. Charles? Anybody? If you don't, I will throw one. Sure? Everybody's? Oh, yes, the youth.
I was just wondering, because I thought it was pretty cool, like, how did you become friends with the Prime Minister of Albania?
That's quite interesting. I had written a book, and the book was called Street Walking. It was about personal evangelism. And when Albania opened its doors to Western journalists, and they were still under communist rule at that time, but they wanted to do this slowly, so they allowed some Western journalists to come in to cover the country. And this one newspaper journalist went in, was invited, and he took with him my book that I'd written about witnessing, called Street Walking. So he was going to read it on the plane. But when we got to Albania, the book was confiscated because they thought it was about prostitution, because the name of it was Street Walking. And so they and in the book, the back page, I had a prayer of salvation. So the book finally found its way to the Minister of Culture, and the Minister of Culture then called me, and called me at home, at our home in Georgia, and told me about this. And he said that your book has been confiscated, but in reading it, I didn't see anything about prostitution. This is about your Christian faith. And I said, no, not really. It's about Jesus and about sharing about Jesus? And he says, yes, 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 that's what I mean. He said, but the message in the back page. I said, yeah. He says, I said that out loud. So what does this mean now? And I said, well, it means that you have said a prayer to God and that you have realized your need for God and want to bring him into you. He said, yes, but I must talk to you about this. So he invited us to Albania. And while we were there, then we were introduced to some of the other high levels, and the prime minister, who was an archaeologist, found out that I was also an archaeologist, and that they had no diplomatic relations with any country except Turkey, and then he contacted Turkey, and Turkey gave me a good recommendation, and so the prime minister then invited me to come to excavate this amphitheater, and so we became very close as a result of that, and so that's how all that happened.
Tell them about the first 5 years.
Oh yeah. That was another interesting thing because of that relationship with the prime minister, I was invited to serve as a religious liaison for the country of Albania, and so anyone who wanted to get into that country had to go across my desk. And so for the first 5 years, we had the ability to keep people out that didn't need to be in there, and to open the doors to those that were real Bible believers and those that were really turned on to the Lord. So,
Well, thank you so much for sharing your evening with us and your testimony. And for those of us here, I truly believe that we have sown to our spirits today. And as the Lord says in the book of Galatians, when you sow to the flesh, of the flesh you shall reap corruption. But when you sow to your spirit, or sow to the spirit, of the spirit, you reap life everlasting. So, Father, we just thank you for this evening. We thank you that we have each gathered something that will help propel us in our Christian walk, something that we can use in our day-to-day lives to be a better representation and representation of the Christ in us to the world. And we do this all for the glory of the name that is above every name. That is the name of Jesus. Hallelujah. Amen. Well, good night, family, and good night to everyone watching this in years to come.